October 12th, 1955, 10:47 a.m., Manhattan Criminal Court, room 304. Judge Harold Whitmore raised his gavel. The courtroom was packed, 50 spectators, 12 jurors, prosecutors, defense attorneys, court reporters, everyone waiting for the verdict in the corruption trial of Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson. The evidence was overwhelming. Witness testimony, financial records, police statements, all fabricated, all purchased, all designed to send Bumpy to prison for 20 years. Judge Whitmore's hand tightened around the gavel. He was about to speak, about to deliver the guilty verdict he'd been paid $50,000 to deliver. And then Bumpy Johnson stood up, slow, deliberate. Every eye in the courtroom turned to him. His lawyer tried to pull him down. Bumpy ignored him. He looked directly at Judge Whitmore and said 5 words that made the judge's face go white. "Your Honor, may I speak?" And what Bumpy said in the next 60 seconds didn't just save his life. It destroyed a judge's career, exposed a 15-year-old murder, and proved that the most dangerous evidence isn't in a file. It's in memory. The trial had been a setup from the beginning. 3 months earlier, July 1955, the 5 families had finally found a way to hurt Bumpy Johnson. Not with guns, not with soldiers, with the law. Vito Genovese had a simple realization. We can't kill him. He's too protected. We can't rob him. He's too smart. But we can lock him away. Forever. If we control the judge. Judge Harold Whitmore was 52 years old, respected, feared, known for harsh sentences and zero tolerance for organized crime. But what most people didn't know was that Whitmore had debts, gambling debts, $80,000 owed to a loan shark connected to the Genovese family, debts he couldn't pay, debts that made him vulnerable. Sal Maroney made the approach, simple offer, erase the debt, plus $50,000 cash. All Whitmore had to do was ensure Bumpy Johnson got convicted. Fake evidence would be provided, witnesses would testify, the trial would look legitimate, and Bumpy would disappear into federal prison for 2 decades. Whitmore took the deal. What choice did he have? Refuse, and the debt gets called. His house gets taken, his reputation destroyed, his family humiliated, accept and everything goes away. Plus $50,000 to retire on. The trial started September 28th. Prosecution presented their case. Bumpy Johnson was accused of bribing police officers, running illegal gambling operations, and laundering money through legitimate businesses. Witness after witness took the stand. A police captain claimed Bumpy had offered him $10,000 to ignore policy banks. A former associate claimed Bumpy had threatened him. An accountant claimed Bumpy's financial records showed illegal income. All lies, carefully constructed, professionally delivered. Bumpy's defense attorney, a man named Morris Klein, did his best, challenged the witnesses, questioned the evidence, demanded proof. But Judge Whitmore overruled every objection, sustained every prosecution claim, allowed testimony that should have been inadmissible. The trial was rigged. Everyone in the courtroom could feel it, but nobody could prove it. October 12th arrived. Final day. Closing arguments completed. Judge Whitmore called a recess to review the case. He came back at 10:45 a.m., face stern, gavel ready. The courtroom was packed. Bumpy sat at the defense table, calm as ever. No nervousness, no fear, just that calculating stillness that made people uncomfortable. Whitmore looked at the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen, before I instruct you on deliberation, I want to address the court. This case has presented significant evidence of corruption, bribery, and criminal enterprise. The testimony has been compelling. The documentation, substantial." He looked directly at Bumpy. "Mr. Johnson, the evidence against you is overwhelming. I see no reason for the jury to waste time deliberating what is clearly a guilty verdict. Therefore, I am prepared to direct a verdict of guilty on all counts and proceed directly to sentencing. 20 years in federal prison. That's when Bumpy stood up. The courtroom gasped. Morris Klein grabbed his arm. "Bumpy, sit down. You can't address the court without permission." Bumpy gently removed Klein's hand, kept his eyes on Judge Whitmore. "Your Honor, may I speak?" Whitmore's jaw tightened. "Mr. Johnson, you are represented by counsel. Anything you wish to say can be said through your attorney. I prefer to say it myself, sir. This is highly irregular. I can hold you in contempt. You can. But I think you'll want to hear what I have to say. Because it concerns an event that occurred 15 years ago. An event you witnessed. An event that, if brought to light, would put you in prison for a very long time. The courtroom went dead silent. Whitmore's hand froze on the gavel. His face lost color. What are you talking about? March 7th, 1940. Brooklyn, Red Hook neighborhood, warehouse fire, 3 people died. Bumpy's voice was calm, matter of fact, like he was reciting a grocery list. The official report said faulty wiring. But you and I both know that's not what happened. Do we? Whitmore's voice was tight. I don't know what you're implying, but you were there, Your Honor. You were a young prosecutor then, 37 years old, ambitious, building your career. And you witnessed something that night, something you covered up because the man who committed the crime had connections, had power, had the ability to make or break your career. That's a lie. Is it? Bumpy turned to face the courtroom. Everyone in this room is a witness to what I'm about to say. He looked back at Whitmore. March 7th, 1940. Anthony Russo, a union boss, killed 3 men in that warehouse, burned it to cover the evidence. You saw him leaving the scene, saw him with the gasoline can, saw him with blood on his hands, and you did nothing. Because Russo worked for the Genovese family, because reporting it would end your career, because keeping silent meant promotion, power, and the judgeship you now hold. Judge Whitmore's hands were shaking. You have no proof of this. I have my word, spoken in front of 50 witnesses in a court of law, and we both know that's enough to start an investigation, enough to reopen the case, enough to ask why the warehouse fire was never properly investigated, enough to question your role in the cover-up. And Your Honor, covering up a triple murder, that's accessory after the fact. That's 20 to life. Same sentence you're about to give me. The courtroom erupted, spectators whispering, reporters scribbling furiously, prosecutors on their feet objecting, defense attorneys stunned. Judge Whitmore slammed his gavel. Order! Order in this court! He pointed at Bumpy. Mr. Johnson, you are in contempt of court. Bailiff, remove him. The bailiff started forward. Bumpy didn't move. Your Honor, you can remove me. You can hold me in contempt. You can add years to my sentence. But those 50 people just heard what I said. Those 12 jurors just heard it. Those reporters just heard it. And tomorrow morning, every newspaper in New York will be asking questions about the Red Hook warehouse fire, about Anthony Russo, about your role in covering it up. He paused. Or you can dismiss this case. Drop all charges. Let me walk out of here. And I'll never mention March 7th, 1940 again. Not to reporters, not to investigators, not to anyone. It'll be our secret, forever. The courtroom was silent. You could hear breathing, heartbeats, the scratch of the court reporter's pen. Whitmore stared at Bumpy. His career, his reputation, his freedom, all of it hanging in the balance. Prosecutor Michael Sterling stood up. Your Honor, this is clearly an intimidation tactic. Mr. Johnson is attempting to blackmail the court. I move to have him immediately remanded to custody and charged with additional crimes. Bumpy smiled slightly. Am I intimidating anyone, Mr. Sterling? I'm simply recounting events I witnessed 15 years ago. Events that, as a citizen, I have every right to discuss. Events that, coincidentally, involved the judge presiding over my trial. If that makes His Honor uncomfortable, perhaps he should recuse himself. Perhaps another judge should hear this case. A judge without ties to the Genovese family. A judge who wasn't paid $50,000 to convict me. Gasps, shouts, chaos. Whitmore slammed the gavel repeatedly. How dare you? How dare you make such accusations? Bumpy's voice stayed calm. I dare because it's true, and you know it's true, and now 50 witnesses know I've said it's true. So you have a choice, Your Honor. Convict me, and I'll make sure the world knows about Red Hook. Make sure investigators dig into every case you've ever tried. Make sure your connection to the Genovese family becomes front-page news, or dismiss this case right now and walk away. Judge Whitmore sat there, frozen, his mind racing. If he convicted Bumpy, the accusations would go public. Investigations would start. The warehouse fire would be reopened. His involvement would be discovered. his career destroyed, his freedom gone. But if he dismissed the case, he'd look corrupt, weak, controlled. The Genovese family would know he'd been threatened. His reputation would suffer. Either way, he lost. Bumpy had put him in checkmate. Minutes passed. The courtroom stayed silent. Finally, Whitmore spoke. His voice was barely a whisper. 10-minute recess. He stood abruptly, walked to his chambers, slammed the door. In those 10 minutes, Harold Whitmore made the calculation. He could fight Bumpy's accusations, deny everything. But the seed was planted. Investigators would ask questions. Reporters would dig. The warehouse fire would be examined. And eventually, someone would find evidence, a witness, a document, something that proved Bumpy was right. Or he could end it now. Dismiss the case, claim insufficient evidence, take the hit to his reputation, but keep his freedom, keep his life. At 11:07 a.m., Judge Whitmore returned to the courtroom. His face was gray, his hands steady only because he willed them to be. He sat, picked up his gavel, looked at Bumpy, then looked at the prosecution. After careful review of the evidence presented in this trial, I find significant procedural issues that call into question the validity of the testimony. Several witnesses appear to have been improperly vetted. Financial documents lack proper authentication, and the prosecution's case, while compelling in presentation, lacks the concrete proof necessary for conviction beyond a reasonable doubt. Sterling jumped up. "Your Honor, I'm not finished, Mr. Sterling." Whitmore's voice was ice. "Given these issues, I am dismissing all charges against the defendant. Case closed." The gavel came down. Bang! The courtroom exploded, reporters rushing for phones, spectators shouting, prosecutors in shock, defense attorneys celebrating, and Bumpy Johnson standing calmly at the defense table, buttoning his jacket, nodding once to Judge Whitmore. Whitmore met his eyes. Just once. A look that said everything. "I know what you did. I know what I did. This never happened." Bumpy walked out of that courtroom a free man. Behind him, chaos, prosecutors demanding appeals, reporters shouting questions. But Bumpy just walked, calm, steady, out the doors, down the steps, into a waiting car. That evening, Judge Harold Whitmore sat in his study. Drinking scotch, staring at nothing, his clerk knocked, entered. "Your Honor," the mayor's office called. "They want to know why you dismissed the Johnson case." Whitmore didn't look up. "Tell them I found insufficient evidence, but Your Honor, the prosecution had—" "Tell them what I said." The clerk left. Whitmore poured another drink. His career would survive. Barely. The accusations wouldn't stick without proof, but he'd always know, always remember. March 7th, 1940. The warehouse, the bodies, Anthony Russo walking away with a gasoline can. And Harold Whitmore, young, ambitious prosecutor, choosing career over justice. 3 weeks later, Judge Whitmore announced his retirement. Health reasons, the paper said. He moved to Connecticut, opened a small private practice, never spoke about the Bumpy Johnson trial, never spoke about Red Hook, never spoke about what he'd witnessed 15 years earlier. The story became legend in New York's legal community. The time Bumpy Johnson stood up in court and threatened a judge with a 15-year-old murder. Nobody could prove if it was true. But it didn't matter. Bumpy had said it in front of 50 witnesses, had forced a judge to choose between his freedom and Bumpy's conviction. And the judge had blinked. Federal prosecutors tried to appeal the dismissal, claimed judicial misconduct. But without proof of what Whitmore had done, they had nothing. The case was closed. Bumpy walked free. Vito Genovese was furious. $50,000 paid to a judge who'd let Bumpy go. Sal Maroni tried to explain. "Boss, Bumpy knew about Red Hook, knew about Russo, knew about Whitmore's involvement. He'd been sitting on that information for 15 years, waiting. And when they put him in that courtroom, when Whitmore was about to send him away, Bumpy played his card." Genovese shook his head. "How does he always know? How does he always have leverage? Because he pays attention, he remembers. And he waits for the right moment." Morris Klein, Bumpy's attorney, asked the question everyone wanted answered. "Boss, how did you know about the warehouse fire? How did you know Whitmore was there?" Bumpy was in his office, looking out the window at Harlem. "I didn't know." "You what?" "It was a calculated risk. I knew Whitmore was on the Genovese payroll, knew they'd paid him to convict me. So I did research. Found an old case from when Whitmore was a prosecutor. Warehouse fire, Red Hook, 3 bodies, never solved. Russo's name came up in newspaper archives. I put it together, made an educated guess. So you weren't actually there? Bumpy smiled. I was 11 years old in 1940, living in Charleston, South Carolina. I wasn't anywhere near Brooklyn. But Whitmore didn't know that. He panicked, and in panicking, he confirmed everything. Klein stared. You bluffed an entire courtroom. I gave Whitmore a choice: investigate my claims and risk everything, or dismiss the case and keep his secret. He chose survival. That's not bluffing. That's understanding human nature. The warehouse fire was never reopened. Anthony Russo died in 1952, never prosecuted. Judge Harold Whitmore lived another 20 years in Connecticut, never practicing law again. And Bumpy Johnson walked free from a trial designed to imprison him for 2 decades, not with lawyers, not with appeals, with memory, with research, with the understanding that every powerful man has a moment in his past he'd rather forget. All you have to do is find it, mention it, and watch him choose his freedom over your conviction. If this story showed you that the most powerful evidence is fear, hit subscribe. Drop a like if you understand that knowledge is leverage. Comment below, would you have taken the risk of bluffing in court? More legendary action stories coming next. Don't miss them.